This video film shows how an SMP SC valve is serviced. We will demonstrate here how you fit the product wetted seals contained in the LKM service kit. Detailed instructions can be found in your LKM instruction manual. Supply compressed air to open the valve. Remove the upper clamp. Release the compressed air. Pull out the actuator together with the internal valve parts from the valve body. Remove the lower clamp. Remove the balancing housing from the valve body and remove the lip seal. Remove the O-ring from the bonnet. To release the locking wire, use the LKM tool to turn the cylinder anti-clockwise. Take off the cylinder lid, unscrew the nut and remove the washer. Supply compressed air and carefully push out the upper piston. Use a piece of cloth to seal the center hole. Holding the end of the upper piston rod still, loosen the lower plug and separate it from the upper plug. Supply compressed air to the upper seat lift air connection. The compressed air must not be released while working on the clip assembly. Loosen the clip ring, locking ring and clamp rings. Note that on sizes 101.6, NW80 and NW100 there is a circlip instead of a clip ring. Release the compressed air and pull out the upper plug from the bonnet. Remove the lip seal from the upper plug. Remove the 3 screws and washers securing the bonnet to the actuator. Remove the bonnet and the clip assembly from the actuator using a plastic hammer if necessary. Remove the O-ring and the lip seal from the bonnet. The valve is now ready to be fitted with the service kit for product wetted and lower plug seals. Cut through the old seal rings and pull them out of the grooves. taking care not to damage the grooves. First, fit the upper plug side seal ring onto the edge of the plug. Put the valve plug into the LKM plug seal tool housing. Take care not to damage the plug. You can, for example, protect it by using a brass distance piece. Use a pressure the seal into the groove in the valve plug. Fit the bottom seal ring, making sure it is the right way up. Fit the outer and the inner guide rings in the tool housing. Position the seal ring above the slot between the guide rings and put the piston ring on the seal ring with the open end downwards exactly as shown. Fit the upper plug into the piston, take care not to damage the plug, and press the seal into the slot between the outer and inner guide rings in the tool housing. Remove the plug and the piston and check that the seal ring is seated evenly in the slot. Remove the remaining tool parts, together with the fixed seal ring, from the tool housing. Place the piston ring with the open end downwards as shown in the corresponding groove in the tool housing. Place the assembly in. The piston ring enters the slot between the guide rings. Press the upper valve plug downwards against the tool so that the seal ring is pushed into the groove in the valve plug. Ensure that the seal rings are fitted correctly and then release the air compressed between the seal rings and the valve plug. The seal ring for the lower plug should be fitted onto the edge of the plug. Ensure that it is positioned evenly all round. Now use the other part of the tool for the plug seals. Put the lower plug into the tool and press the seal ring into the groove in the valve plug. Remove the lower plug from the tool and check that the seal ring is fitted correctly. Remember to release the air behind the seal ring in the same way as for the upper plug. Before fitting the product wetted O-rings and lip seals, they should be lubricated as specified in the instruction manual. Fit the O-ring and the double lip seal to the bonnet. Slide the smaller bonnet O-ring onto the inner stem. Lubricate the single lip seal and press it into the upper plug. Guide the upper plug through the bonnet. Fit the locking ring and the clip ring to the plug. Slide the upper plug and the bonnet onto the inner stem and into the actuator. Make sure that the air connection on the bonnet matches up to the corresponding hole in the flange. Fit the 3 screws using new washers. Supply compressed air to the lower air connection, the upper seat lift, to enable the clip assembly to be fitted. Fit the clamp ring parts. Fit the locking ring and the clip ring and then release the air. Using a spanner, hold the end of the upper piston rod still while fitting and tightening the lower plug onto the inner stem. Lubricate the lip seal and fit it into the valve body. Position the balancing housing in the valve body and then fit and tighten the lower clamp. Push the upper piston into the cylinder. Fit the washer and nut and tighten. The nut should be about flush with the end of the upper piston rod. When the valve is reassembled, we will show you how the lower seat lift is adjusted using the nut. Fit the cylinder lid on the actuator and re-hook the locking wire. Turn the cylinder lid clockwise until the locking wire is fixed. Lubricate the O-ring and fit it between the bonnet and the valve housing. Supply compressed air to the middle air connection to lift the plugs. Lift the actuator together with the internal valve parts and insert it slowly into the valve body. Note, the size of the plugs mounted on the actuator must always correspond to the size of the house. Fit and tighten the upper clamp. Release the compressed air. Check that the valve is operating smoothly after assembly. The middle air connection for opening the valve. The lower air connection for upper seat lift. And the upper air connection for lower seat lift. The lower seat lift is correctly adjusted when the washer can be moved slightly. Our actuators are maintenance-free, but replacement parts can easily be fitted when necessary. Dismantle the valve in accordance with the instructions shown previously. Fit the service tool to the top of the upper piston rod. Tighten the nut on the tool so that the flange is forced into the cylinder sufficiently far to allow the retaining ring to be removed. Then remove the retaining ring. Hold the end of the tool spindle still with a spanner and loosen the nut on the tool until the spring is fully released. Remember, the end of the tool spindle must not be allowed to turn while releasing the spring. Remove the service tool, the flange, and the spring. At the other end, push the flange sufficiently far into the cylinder to allow the retaining ring to be removed. Then remove the retaining ring. Push out the flange and the lower piston rod together with the pistons and the spring assembly. Use a plastic hammer if necessary. Remove the circlip. Remove the inner stem together with the main piston. Remove the lower piston from the piston assembly. Take off the first circlip and then the spring support. Take off the next circlip and pull the piston off the lower piston rod. Remove the O-rings to be replaced with the actuator service kit. These are the inner and outer O-rings in the piston, the O-rings in the upper piston, the O-ring in the cylinder lid, the O-ring in the main piston, and the small O-ring on the main stem. Now fit and lubricate the new O-rings as follows. The O-ring for the main piston, slide the O-ring onto the inner stem, the inner O-ring in the piston, fit the piston on the lower piston rod and secure with a circlip. Take care not to overextend the circlip. Fit the spring support and secure it with a circlip. Fit the outer O-ring onto the piston. And fit the inner and outer O-rings to the lower and upper pistons. Fit the O-ring in the cylinder lid. The actuator is now ready for reassembly. First, push the main piston assembly into the cylinder using a plastic hammer if necessary. Make sure that the piston has passed the groove for the big circlip. Fit the circlip in the cylinder, making sure that it is seated correctly. Fit the spring onto the inner stem. Push the piston assembly into the cylinder. Fit the lower piston into the cylinder. Slide the bottom flange into the cylinder and fit the retaining ring. Push the big spring into the top of the cylinder and position the upper flange. Screw the service tool as far as it will go into the top of the upper piston rod. Hold the tool end still and turn the nut on the tool until the flange is forced down sufficiently far to enable the retaining ring to be fitted. Fit the retaining ring, making sure that it is seated correctly. Loosen the nut and remove the tool. Reassemble the valve following the instructions shown previously.